The calm before the storm. That is what I am calling this episode. Why? Because I know there is a storm getting ready to come down on the Borderlands, especially when it comes to the issue of stopping this highway. But this episode really brought about some peace for a lot of the characters, and definitely brought about some relativity when it comes to characters connecting with one another. For example, we have Nova, who seems to be making her self comfortable in the spaces of individuals that she pretty much betrayed with the writing of this book. However, she's doing her best to redeem herself by going around and apologizing to individuals. For example, we can see in this episode, she was at Violet's diner. And let's admit, even though Violet in this episode did not necessarily forgive Nova right away, what she did do was at least allow Nova to stay in the diner. Even though she did say, like, you're not supposed to be here, she did allow her to do that much. So I can slowly but surely see the progression in Violet and Nova's relationship, because of the fact that at the least she allowed Nova to stay in the diner. We also have Charlie that was in the diner. This was a good episode for Charlie and Nova. And like I said in the beginning, in this episode, we see a lot of characters relating to one another. So throughout this episode, I feel like what we have Charlie and Nova relating to one another and finding some healing in their situation. Charlie invites Nova to go on a retreat with her, go have a little girls trip with her, because she knows she is getting ready to be preoccupied with stopping this highway, the election, and figuring out who the hell is responsible for burning down Queen Sugar. Well, not necessarily burning it down, but setting it on fire. So in this episode, we see Charlie and Nova. They're going on this peaceful retreat, which I thought was actually funny. But the retreat looks nice, just kind of funny. And what we learn is that growing up, Nova has always felt like Charlie was ashamed of her and throwing her money in her face. Meanwhile, Charlie felt like Nova was constantly tearing her down. So what we can see is that we have one situation that they both shared, an experience they both shared, but they experienced it differently. They perceived it differently. Each of them don't even recall making one another feel that way. So it's quite interesting. And if you listen to how they speak, it's as if they're talking about this for the first time. So you can imagine for years now, because this is when they were younger, for years now they have held on to these emotions, and has finally disclosed this information amongst one another, and come to realize, like, wow, we experienced the exact same situation, but we've been perceiving it completely two different ways for a very long time. So while each were blaming one another for the brokenness in their their sisterhood, they now learn it's actually on both of them, because both of them did some things that wasn't exactly backed up with sisterly love, and both of them have been perceiving things in a way in which they felt like the other was ashamed of the other, or was rude to the other, or whatever the case may be. So this episode really gave Charlie and Nova a chance to reconnect with one another, lay all this out on the table, and find some healing and start to understand each other's point of view about one another. Really, really good to see them get to this point. And it may not be resolved overnight, but at least they're communicating with one another and putting this out there and starting to understand what the other is going through or has been going through, and why they felt the way they felt about the other. So anyway, moving on to Darla. Now, we saw in the previous episode, Darla was like on the verge of drinking. She has been going through it, especially with the release of Nova's book. I mean, I feel like I've been going through it as a commentator with the release of Nova's book, because most of these storylines seem to be surrounded by, or seem to surround Nova's the release of Nova's book, aka the release of Nova's family secrets. So we have Darla, who in this episode has a friend who comes back to town, and Darla is not here for it, but she decides to meet with this friend because maybe they had some sort of friendship that was just really, I don't know, has longevity behind it. Whatever the conviction was that Darla felt like she had to meet with this friend who was clearly toxic, it ends up putting Darla in a situation where she learns some devastating news. And that devastating news that this friend revealed, or this so-called friend reveals, is that Darla actually, the night that she conceived Blue, had intercourse with two different men, which means that Blue's actual father could be between the two different men. I believe this entire time Darla has been under the impression that it was only one man that could be Blue's father, but now learning that it's between two men was a lot more that Darla could take and accept and handle. And she just ends up at a bar where we see her throwing them back. I mean, she's throwing them back, till we finally see her again in another scene where she runs into Violet. She's drunk. Violet can clearly see that. She's devastated. She's looking for Blue. She's at the wrong park looking for Blue, mind you, because Blue is supposed to be at a park with Micah, but she's at the wrong one, which I thought was kind of funny, but not funny. It's really sad. And Violet, manages to convince Darla to come with her so she can help Darla get back home. And Darla went, she tried to protest, but she went. She got a little aggressive for a minute, but she know better. And she ended up going with Violet. And what we get to see is that Violet and Darla has their relative moment. They have a moment together where they're able to relate to one another, where Violet reveals things that has happened to her in the past and pretty much gives Darla that consent to forgive herself, if a consent was even needed, but just to give her that encouragement, rather, to forgive herself for what happened in the past, and to also let her know, listen, you were inebriated, you were high, you were taken advantage of, you can't even remember that you slept with these, or at least the second man, you can't even remember. So that means someone in your drunken state, and your state of being high, and your state of not being mentally capable to consent, took advantage of you. Pretty much, they took advantage of you. It was assault, rape, whatever you want to call it. That's pretty much what happened, because they should have known better. You were in no condition to consent. So I feel like, because it came from Violet, who I feel like Darla really respects and has been working hard to get her respect for like seasons now, I feel like that gave Darla the extra encouragement to forgive herself and stop being so hard on herself. Also, Violet invites over Ralph Angel, and Ralph Angel hears the story firsthand from Darla, and it's a really emotional point of the show. But Ralph Angel pretty much also encourages Darla to stop apologizing and to recognize that it's not her fault, and that she has nothing. She has done nothing for him to have to forgive. It's okay, and it's going to be okay. So that was a really good moment. Like I said, I feel like that is where we get to see Darla and Violet pretty much connect with one another on a level that we have not seen at all throughout the entire show. So anyway, moving forward, Blue and Micah. So Micah takes Blue to an amusement park, and there was a point where Blue had to use the restroom, but the line for the men's restroom was too long. So Blue had decided to go into the women's restroom, and Micah was not looking at that point. So when Micah finally looked up, Blue was gone, and he just became frantic because he thought he lost Blue. Well, Blue ended up running into an officer at the park who had his squad car nearby, and he explained the situation, and the officer was like, no worries, it happens all the time, just sit in the squad car, trust me, someone's gonna come for you. And he called it in on the walkie-talkie. So next thing you know, Micah ends up discovering the squad car with little Blue sitting in the back. And I believe personally that in this moment of seeing Blue in the back of the squad car, it probably had already triggered something in Micah. For one, the officer was white. Then you have Blue, who's a little black boy. Like, I think already Micah was already triggered. So then the officer comes up, and he's like Micah is trying to explain that's his cousin, but the officer is like, I need an ID. I need an ID. Now, here is where my ignorance of the law comes in, because I'm not sure if the officer is necessarily wrong for asking for an ID, because to be honest, would you, if your child was missing and anybody just walked up and said, oh, that's my child, I think we all would want someone to prove that that is really their child, just in case, because you have individuals who may try some stuff like that. However, I believe because of Micah's previous experiences, he's like, wait a minute, what? My ID? I just told you that's my cousin. Like, just take my word for it. So I don't know who exactly was wrong in the situation. However, where I do say say the officer was more the wrong in the situation was when he put his hand on his gun to pretty much threaten Micah to conform to what he was saying. And I just thought that was like, okay, now listen. Okay, that's unnecessary. That was completely unnecessary. And it took Blue saying like, wait, that's my cousin, for the officer to finally back down. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, you finally letting Blue go to Micah after Blue says that's his cousin. Why did you ask for the ID in the first place if in the end you didn't need it? So listen, in my opinion, either way it go, it was just another racist encounter, and it was bullcrap. And it was a big encounter, and I hated it. And I hated the fact that this officer felt like because he had that gun, he can use that as a means to make someone, or make Micah rather, do what he wanted him to do. I just thought that was bullcrap. It could have been handled a lot better than that. And it's very interesting that he was very quick to resort to that action. Like, he was very quick to use his gun as a means to get what he wanted. Bullcrap. So anyway, we have Hollywood, Prosper, and Ralph Angel at Hollywood and Violet's home. In Hollywood, what is Hollywood cooking up? What is going on? Is they getting ready to have a barbecue? I don't know. He got them ribs going. I used to love some ribs back in the day, y'all, but I'm trying to get off the pork. I'm leaving that pork alone. I haven't had ribs in probably since last year. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We have these three wonderful men together, convening together at the table, sharing stories, and basically talking about relationships, which I think is so awesome. And anyway, moving forward, I thought it was also very cute that Prosper was just gushing over the fact that, he likes that woman. I can never remember her name. I think it's Miss Geneva. I can't remember her name, but Prosper said he's sweet on her. I thought that was just really cute. But anyway, Blue and Micah ends up walking in, and Blue reveals to Ralph Angel that he was sitting in the back of that police squad car at the park. And so they wait for Micah to explain, and even Blue was like, the officer treated him really mean or something like that, Blue revealed. And so immediately Hollywood, Ralph Angel, and Prosper already knew. And that's what I think is very powerful about this scene, that they chose to write the fact that Blue and Micah, as two black boys, walk in to, after this situation, in an racial encounter with the officer, they walk into three black men. So you got like three black men who more than likely knows and has experienced what these two black boys have just experienced. So it's like the perfect setup, the perfect scene, because there in this scene, Micah finds the comfort of men who can relate to what he has just went through as a black male. And it was powerful. We sometimes are surrounded by people that'll tell boys, especially, you can't cry, you got to be tough, suck it up, and it's like, and I talked about this in the previous episode, where is the help for black men, for black boys? Where's the psychological help for the trauma that they experience? And the fact that in this scene we see Blue and Micah, but especially Micah, has that support from these black men in that room. Yeah, they may not be, certified professionals or whatever the case may be, but they're individuals who can, again, relate. And that's why I think this word relate is very important in this episode, because again, it seems like the writers really put characters in the same scenes that can relate to one another and the struggles or whatever it is that they have been through or are going through. So again, I really appreciated this. I appreciate Prosper speaking up to Micah, like, listen, however you're feeling, son, feel it. It's okay, but just don't let it stop you. Don't succumb to this stuff. It happens. Figure out a way to use your voice and your power positively to make an impact, but don't stop living because of it. I really appreciate that. It's almost as if he's telling him, don't let that hate consume you. So anyway, that is pretty much it. I definitely wanted to close with that scene because, like I said, that was really a powerful scene in this episode. And again, to see these characters come together with other characters at a certain pivotal time in their life and have these relations with one another, these relative, how can I put it, relative moments where it's like, okay, I know what you're going through and I can empathize. I just thought this was a really great episode. But let's not forget, people, there is a storm brewing, and we are definitely going to see this storm coming very, very soon. And I feel like with the healing, we're starting to see a lot of these characters doing the bonding. It's going to make for a great team to go up against whatever and whoever it is that is out to build this highway and out to destroy Charlie. So until next episode, let me know what you all think in the comment section. Peace.